Welcome to Value Plays Only, where Tefka just makes some little guys. Today, we have Tyler playing Marneus Calgar. This Esper value pile is chock-a-block full of token generators that Marneus turns into card advantage. It can win with Fastest Oracle or Hullbreaker Horde loops. His hand contains a Taru, Wan Shi Tong Librarian, Ranger Captain of Eos, Mox Diamond, Talisman of Dominance, Exotic Orchard, and Cavern of Souls. John is playing Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator, and Bruse Tarl, Boorish Herder. This mid-range value deck looks to use Malcolm and Bruse to generate piles of treasures and cast some expensive wins. It can win with Glinthorn Buccaneer, Underworld Breach, or Trickery Charm combos. His hand contains a Wan Shi Tong Librarian, Mana Drain, Wheel of Fortune, Mox Diamond, Leyline of Transformation, Polluted Delta, and Sea of Clouds. Kami is playing Sheoldred, the Apocalypse. This mono-black control deck looks to punish mid-range value decks while slowly draining the table. It can win with Bloodchief Ascension and Mindcrank, or Chain of Smog and Professor Onyx. Her hand contains a Vampiric Tutor, Mox Diamond, the One Ring, Toxic Deluge, Volrath Stronghold, and 2 Swamps. Dan is playing Kefka, Court Mage. This is a Grixis mid-range deck pretending to be a hand disruption deck. This deck can generate massive card advantage through Kefka before running with Fastest Oracle or Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Soul Ring, Grim Monolith, Talisman of Dominance, Cabal Ritual, the One Ring, and Watery Grave. His London Mulligan is a Misdirection. And with that, let's see some value plays. John has a pre-game action, putting Leyline of Transformation into play, naming Pirate as it enters. Tyler then starts things off with a Cavern of Souls, naming Spirit as it enters. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding Exotic Orchard as it enters. He then passes the turn. John plays a Sea of Clouds as land for turn. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts Mox Diamond, discarding Polluted Delta as it enters. John then passes the turn. Kami plays a Swamp as land for turn. She casts a Mox Diamond, discarding a Swamp as it enters. Kami passes the turn. Dan plays a Watery Grave as land for turn, into play on tap, paying 2 life. He exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand to cast a Soul Ring. He casts a Cabal Ritual. It resolves and Dan adds 3 black mana. He taps out for the One Ring. John responds with a Mana Drain, countering the One Ring. Dan, totally blown out and with no other plans, passes the turn. In his end step, Tyler flashes in a Wan Shi Tong Librarian with X equals 0. The turn then moves to Tyler. Tyler untaps and draws. He casts an Arcane Signet. Tyler goes to combat and swings Wan Shi Tong at Dan. He then passes the turn, missing his land drop. John untaps and draws. In his first main phase, he adds 4 colorless mana through Mana Drain. He casts his commander, Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. He taps out for a Wan Shi Tong Librarian with X equals 2. In response, Kami casts a Vampiric Tutor. She searches up a card to the top of her library and loses 2 life. Tyler's Wan Shi Tong triggers to get a counter and draw a card. John's bird then resolves and triggers to draw. John passes the turn. Kami untaps and draws. She plays a Volrath Stronghold as land for turn. She casts a Soul Ring. She then taps out for the One Ring. The table looked to John again, but he already shot his counter. The One Ring resolves, Kami gains protection from everything. She taps it to draw a card. Kami then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a Marsh Flats as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Badlands. 2 Wan Shi Tongs trigger and John and Tyler draw. He casts a Talisman of Dominance. He then casts the last card in his hand, Grim Monolith. Pinning all his hopes on a future Kefka, Dan passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a City Brass as land for turn. He casts a Talisman of Dominance. He taps out for a Monologue Tax. Tyler then goes to combat, swinging Wan Shi Tong at Dan. Dan takes the damage, and Tyler passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He casts a Grand Abolisher. It resolves, and John plays an Aired Mesa as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Volcanic Island. Wan Shi Tong triggers to get a counter and draw Tyler a card. John goes to combat, swinging Wan Shi Tong at Tyler and Malcolm at Dan. Tyler thinks about trading, but decides he likes his engines. They both take the damage, and Malcolm triggers to make 2 treasures. In his second main phase, he casts an Arcane Signet. Monologue Tax triggers to make a treasure. He then casts a Drannith Magistrate. All the hopes of this game wrapping up quickly go down the drain, and John passes the turn. Kami untaps, and in her upkeep, she takes 1 from the One Ring. She taps it to draw 2 cards. Kami plays a Swamp as land for turn. She casts Cyan in Blood, targeting herself. She draws 2 and loses 2 life. She casts a Cursed Totem. Monologue Tax triggers to make a treasure. Kami then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He looks at his only card in hand and back at the Drannith. He takes no game actions, passing the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a Tundra as land for turn. He casts a Ranger Captain of Eos. It enters and triggers to search up a Mockingbird to hand. John's Wan Shi Tong triggers to get a counter and draw. He then casts Taru. It enters and triggers targeting Dan. John shows Dan a card in hand, saying Dan shouldn't take this draw. Dan gets the message and declines. Tyler then casts Amphibian Downpour with Storm Count 2, frogging Wan Shi Tong, Drannith, and Abolisher on John's board. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays a Sacred Foundry's land for turn, into play on tap, paying 2 life. He goes to combat, swinging 2 frogs at Kami, Malcolm at Dan, and his big frog at Tyler. They all declare no blocks and take the damage. Malcolm triggers to make 3 treasures. In his second main phase, John casts the One Ring. It enters and he gains protection from everything. John then casts Wheel of Fortune, the card he showed Dan. Monologue Tax triggers to make a treasure. Dan responds here with the only card in hand, Orcish Bowmasters. The moon in the room takes a nosedive. John begs for mercy, but Dan says it is what it is. Bowmaster enters and triggers, pinging off the Drannith Frog. With that, wheel resolves and everyone discards their hand and draws 7. Bowmaster triggers 21 times. Tataru triggers to make a tap treasure. Dan pings off John's board with 7 damage, Tyler's board with 11 damage, and the last 3 triggers ping Cammy. With this turn going much worse than John expected, he passes the turn. Cammy taps in her upkeep, she takes 2 from the One Ring. She taps the ring to draw 3 cards. Bowmaster triggers 3 times to ping Cammy for 3. She plays a Swamp as land for turn. She casts her commander, Sheoldred the Apocalypse. She then casts a Torpor Orb. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Cammy then passes the turn. Dan untaps in a very different position than one moment ago. He plays a Volcanic Island as land for turn. He goes to combat swinging his 25-25 Orc army at Cammy. She blocks with Sheoldred and both die. In his second main phase, Dan casts his commander, Kefka, Court Mage. It resolves and does nothing under Torpor Orb. Forgetting this did nothing, Dan has to pass the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a Mana Confluence as land for turn. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Talisman of Progress. Tyler casts his commander, Marneus Calgar. It resolves and Tyler passes the turn. In his end step, John taps his One Ring to draw a card. Bowmaster pings Tyler for 1. John untaps and in his upkeep, he takes 1 from the One Ring. He plays a Command Tower as land for turn. He casts Teferi, Time Raveler. There's a lot of debate about this, but ultimately, it resolves. John activates the -3 loyalty ability of Teferi to bounce Bowmaster back to Dan's hand. He activates the One Ring to draw 2 cards. John casts Lion's Eye Diamond. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Marneus triggers to draw. John recasts his commander, Malcolm, Key-Eye Navigator. He passes the turn. Cammy untaps in her upkeep, she takes 3 from the One Ring. She plays a Swamp as land for turn. Cammy recasts her commander, Sheoldred the Apocalypse. She casts a Dauthi Voidwalker. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Marneus triggers to draw. Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 2. Cammy then passes the turn. Dan untaps and in his upkeep, Cammy traps the One Ring to draw 4. Sheoldred triggers to gain 8. Dan draws for turn. Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 2. He casts Lotus Petal. He plays an Underground River as land for turn. He casts an Arcane Signet. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Marneus triggers to draw. Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 2. Dan recasts Orcish Bowmasters. It enters and does nothing under Torpor Orb. Dan goes to combat and swings Kefka at Teferi. John begs him to reconsider opening up Tyler, but Dan is set in his plan. Kefka triggers to discard a land, artifact, creature, and sorcery, drawing 4. Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 8. Teferi takes the damage and dies. In his second main phase, Dan casts Imperial Seal. He searches up a card at the top of his library and loses 2 life. He then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. Sheoldred and Mana Vault trigger. He takes 1 and then 2, and then moves to his main phase. He casts the One Ring. It enters and triggers to gain protection from everything. Tyler casts Grim Hireling. He goes to combat and swings Marneus at John. John blocks with Malcolm and it dies, likely to never be seen again. In his second main phase, Tyler casts Gilded Drake. Priority passes around and it resolves. Gilded Drake resolves and does nothing due to Torpor Orb. Tyler slams his head in shame. He then passes the turn. John untaps and in his upkeep he takes 2 from the One Ring. He draws and Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 2. He casts a Delny, Streetwise Lookout. John then casts a Phyrexian Metamorph. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Marneus triggers to draw. Bowmaster pings Delny for 1. In response to Metamorph, Tyler taps his One Ring to draw. Bowmaster kills off Delny. Metamorph resolves as a copy of Bowmaster with no ETB. John asks if Dan will agree to not shoot each other's creatures with Bowmaster, and Dan agrees. John taps the One Ring to draw 3 cards. Sheoldred triggers 3 times and Bowmaster triggers 3 times. Dan pings off Grim Hireling in Tyler's face for 1, and John loses 6. John then plays Hallowed Fountain as land for turn, into play on tap, paying 2 life. John then passes the turn, discarding the hand size. Cammy untaps and in her upkeep, she takes 4 from the One Ring. She draws and Sheoldred triggers to gain 2. She plays Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx as land for turn. Cammy goes into the tank on how she can try to close out the win here. Everyone is really zeroed in on the Time Twister in the Dauthi zone, even though Cammy can't actually cast it due to her own Curse Totem. The table haven't noticed this though, and play out the turn as if she can cast it, which would kill everyone with Sheoldred. Cammy casts Deadly Rollick, targeting John's Bowmaster. John responds with an offer you can't refuse, targeting Rollick. Rollick is countered and Cammy makes 2 treasures. Cammy goes back into the tank here, knowing she would die to Bowmaster if the wheel resolved. John suggests she twist her anyway, and he'll put his Bowmaster triggers on Dan, killing him and Tyler. This would leave John in a 1v1 with Cammy and a large life disparity. After a lot of debate, Cammy decides this seems like a good plan. She starts with a painful quandary, trying to lock everyone out more. Dan responds with an offer you can't refuse, countering quandary and giving Cammy 2 more treasures. Cammy then casts Feed the Swarm, targeting Dan's Bowmaster. It dies and Cammy loses 2 life. Cammy then sacrifices Dauthi, which she shouldn't be able to do, to cast Time Twister from exile. Dan has to step in here with a Force Negation, exiling Daze as an alternate cost. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Marneus triggers to draw. In response, John casts Flusterstorm with all copies targeting Force Negation. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Marneus triggers to draw. Bowmaster and Sheoldred ping him for 3. Dan responds with a Mindbreak Trap, targeting all opposing spells on the stack. All the other spells are exiled, and Marneus' draw then resolves, drawing a card. Bowmaster and Sheoldred ping him for 3. With the stack clear, Cammy taps the One Ring to draw 5 cards. Sheoldred and Bowmaster trigger 5 times, targeting Marneus. Marneus dies and Cammy gains 10 life. She then casts Lightning Greaves and equips it to Sheoldred. Cammy casts No Mercy. Everyone reads this card to figure out what the hell it does, and it resolves. Cammy then passes the turn, discarding the hand size. Dan untaps and draws. Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 2. Dan casts Hullbreaker Horror. Tyler responds with a Valley Floodcaller. Dan responds with a hardcast Force of Will, targeting the Otter. Monologue tax triggers to make a treasure. Tyler then hardcasts a Fierce Guardianship, countering Force. Valley Floodcaller then resolves. Hullbreaker Horror then resolves. Sadly, Dan tapped down too low from this fight and can't start his loop. Dan has to pass the turn. Tyler untaps and in his upkeep he takes 1 from the One Ring. He draws for turn. Sheoldred triggers to ping him for 2. Tyler casts Tainted Pact. He starts exiling slowly, and John asks what he's looking for. He says he's looking for Thassa's Oracle. He starts exiling, and exiling, and exiling until he gets to the second card from the bottom, revealing Thassa's Oracle, putting it in hand, with only 1 card left in his library. Tyler casts Into the Floodmaw, targeting Torpor Orb, giving Dan a fish. John responds with a Mental Misstep. Tyler has a Mental Misstep of his own. John's misstep is countered, and Torpor Orb is bounced to hand. Tyler then casts Thassa's Oracle. With no more answers, it enters, triggers, and with that, Tyler wins the game. Today, we have a 2-for-1 deal. In this game, Tyler is playing Dargo the Shipwrecker and Tymna the Weaver. This deck looks to loop Dargo with Relic of Legends or Burgi and a Sacrifice Outlet, or it can win with Underworld Breach. His hand contains an Esper Sentinel, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, Arcane Signet, Sacrifice, Peer into the Abyss, the Jolly Balloon Man, and Verdant Catacombs. Nick, from the top deckers, is playing Thrasios Triton Hero and Tymna the Weaver. This deck leverages 2 card advantage engines in the command zone to piece together an Infinite Mana or Thassa's Oracle win. His hand contains an Avacyn's Pilgrim, Lotho Corrupt Sheriff, Tataru Taru, Silence, and Tropical Island. His Luna Mulligans are Seedborn Muse and an Offer You Can't Refuse. John is playing Narset and Lightened Exile. This is a graveyard turbo deck built to take advantage of doubling up on powerful spells before closing the game with Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Burning Inquiry, Mental Misstep, Flusterstorm, Deflecting Swat, Cloud of the Dominus, Merchant Scroll, and Tarnished Citadel. Dan is playing Atraxa, Grand Unifier. This is a big mana food chain deck. It looks to ramp out its commander for massive value, winning with Thassa's Oracle or commander damage. His hand contains an Esper Sentinel, Grand Abolisher, Tainted Pact, Food Chain, Bright Glass Gear Hulk, Exotic Orchard, and Verdant Catacombs. And with that, let's see some value plays. Tyler starts things off with a Verdant Catacombs. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Badlands. He casts a Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer. John gives this some thought, and then casts Mental Misstep. Tyler asks if he's serious, and John says he has a plan, and he can't have that card in play. Ragavan is countered, and Tyler passes in disbelief. Nick plays a Tropical Island, his land for turn. He casts an Avacyn's Pilgrim. He passes the turn. John plays a Tarnished Citadel, his land for turn. He casts a Burning Inquiry. Everyone groans and then draws 3 and discards 3 cards at random. Notably, Dan discards Food Chain, and Tyler discards Peer into the Abyss, and Sacrifice. John feels good about his misstep now. He casts Mox Amber, and passes the turn. Dan plays an Exotic Orchard, his land for turn. He casts an Esper Sentinel. He then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays an Exotic Orchard, his land for turn. He casts an Arcane Signet. Esper triggers and Dan draws. Tyler casts Reanimate, targeting Nick's Tataru Taru. It enters and triggers, targeting Nick. Nick and Tyler draw, and Tataru triggers to make a tap treasure. Tyler then passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays Verdant Catacombs, his land for turn. He pays Life of Graxit, fetching him an Underground Sea. He casts a Lotho Corrupt Sheriff. He then casts a Mana Vault, Lotho and Esper trigger. Dan draws, and Tataru triggers to make a tap treasure. Nick then loses a life and makes a treasure. He then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays a Sea of Clouds, his land for turn. He casts a Merchant Scroll. Esper triggers, Dan draws. Tataru triggers to make a tap treasure. John searches up an Offer You Can't Refuse in a desperate bid to make some mana on his turn. He then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a Verdant Catacombs, his land for turn. He pays a Life of Graxit, fetching up a Bayou. He casts a Mox Opal. Dan then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He cracks 3 treasures for 3 red. He spends 1 to cast his commander, Dargo the Shipwrecker. He casts a Ruthless Technomancer. Lotho triggers to lose a life and make a treasure. It enters and triggers to sacrifice Dargo, making 7 treasures. He recasts Dargo for 1 red mana. He casts Culling the Weak, sacrificing Dargo as an additional cost. Esper triggers, and in response, Dan casts Vampiric Tutor. He searches up a card to the top of his library and loses 2 life. Seeing a problem now, Tyler pays for Esper. Culling then resolves, adding 4 black. He casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting Dan. After some debate, it resolves, and Tyler takes the card that Dan conveniently put on top, Silence. He casts Silence. In desperation, Nick casts a Mindbreak Trap. Esper triggers and Dan draws. Tataru makes a tap treasure. Praetor's Grasp is then exiled. He recasts Dargo for 1 red mana. Tyler then casts the Jolly Balloon Man. He activates it to make a copy of Ruthless Technomancer. The Techno copy sacrifices the original, making 2 treasures. He activates the Techno copy ability, making 5 total treasures to reanimate the original Technomancer. It enters and triggers to sacrifice Dargo, making 7 treasures. He spends 1 to recast Dargo, sacrificing Technomancer as part of the cost. He can now present a loop of reanimating Technomancer with the copy for 5, sacrificing Dargo, and casting Dargo for 1, sacrificing Technomancer. This loop creates 7 treasures and uses 6, making 1 treasure each time. He continues this loop to make infinite treasures. He then casts Professional Facebreaker. He can use Facebreaker to exile some of his infinite treasures to exile most of his library. He casts Goblin Bombardment. He now presents a loop of sacrificing Dargo to Bombardment to ping an opponent for 1, and then recasting him with some of his mana. He does this over and over until his opponents are dead. And with that, Tyler wins the game. So what did we learn today? Try to remember what stacks pieces are in play, otherwise you might burn precious counterspells you didn't need to, stopping someone that isn't even a problem. If you have any tips for the video, leave them below. Subscribe if you feel like it. Until next time, keep making value plays. I have 1 card in hand and I showed it to Dan.
It's not.
Should I be
Grand
scared?
Abolisher will not.
No. I mean, could he top deck something to insta-win?
No. I don't even think intuition, like intuition for Breach and Savine's and thing doesn't do it.
I have a response.
Oh, what?
I'm gonna pay
What?
2
No.
Flash in an Orcish.
Dan, you fucking wouldn't. I told you! Do you see how I did it for you?
I drew 1 card.
Dan, that's so fucking fucked. Oh my god.
You have protection, just so you know.
I don't give a shit. I have boys.
So bad.
Have it.
I'll tell you, I planted to take Sheoldred.
Okay.
He ain't doing it.
I am doing
Kenny,
This is
Kenny, he's under Torpor Orb. It doesn't matter. Do you pass on it?
Why wouldn't you have said that first?
He might not have realized.
I was playing it
Because
up.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, I knew.
I
Didn't realize.
Yeah.
Alright, I have a 3-2 flag. Honestly, for Marneus and
Yeah.
Durham Hireling,
Yeah,
pretty good. I pass. I pass on that.
Yeah. Great. It's a Bowmaster.
That makes sense.
It doesn't trigger. I can't
Oh.
say this enough.
No.
Yeah. You see how little it fucking matters? Why don't you just draw 5 and see what happens?
No.
Damn.
Why would I do
Shitload of
that?
Bowmaster things.
Let me play, ref. Well, I have a response.
I'm getting rid of Dan's
I
too,
have a response.
to be clear.
Kimmy, I don't give a shit. Hey man, you touch my stuff, I care. You touch Dan's stuff, I don't
You
care.
have the most life. You're probably
You
gonna
said
live.
you're gonna kill all of us.
No, you're probably gonna live now. I couldn't get Gary out.
Hey, do you have your commander?
Oh no, sorry, everyone fucking shit on it for the second time. My bad.
You didn't have to block.
I thought I was holding that up this whole
Could have
time.
given me a couple treasures and a draw.
Fuck.
Just let it die.
Wow.
Why don't you tap it real quick to draw?
No.
John wants to pay. John wants to pay
Tammy,
so
come on.
bad.
I will fight you on it if you shoot. I have nothing left.
I will fight you on it. I was just like pleading.
I believe.
He's got nothing.
I'll show you an offer, you fucking asshole.
You get
That
treasure.
sucks.
Oh.
Take your treasures, asshole.
John in
Are you
unintelligible
kidding me?
noises.
Kimmy, I have nothing else. I'm getting blown out by him. I'm getting blown out by him. I'm running out of life. I don't gain life for my 1 ring. My commander's gone. My hand sucks. I can't draw. Kimmy, I'll fight.
John, stop! John, please!
Don't look at me from your fucking ivory treasure tower.
Fight.
Dude, I can fight!
It's every game.
I'm
I'll
powerful.
kill you.
Dude, look how powerful I am.
I'd fight against it.
Right, because I think
I would die.
I think I literally will.
We would all die.
I think I'll win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't cast it.
So what if I kill your Bowmaster?
If you
Right.
kill his Bowmaster, then
Well,
Then you die to Dan.
Well, then I
'Cause
still-
the only reason that you don't die is because I'm pointing my triggers at them.
You really won't?
No, I'll kill them.
Cammy, I'm gonna fight your time twister.
Right, and I'll fight for you.
Cammy, we
John
already
doesn't
saw
have
he has a
anything.
card he can't use.
I have everything!
He doesn't have
Dude,
shit.
you
He
bitches!
doesn't have anything.
Don't
This
act
doesn't
like that.
seem like a good deal.
It's a good
It's
deal.
not a fucking
You're making
deal.
me go for the devil.
It's a good deal.
He says, I think I can win. You should do that.
Can we do something or no?
I don't know what to do.
Put it on the stack.
John,
Stop.
shut up! Get this guy out of here!
Just put it on the stack and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, put it on the stack, and then we'll figure out what we want to do about it. This guy's out of time, Mr. Balls.
John!
I really
Alright,
want to.
I know! You should!
Game mind breaking the fluster's sick.
Yeah, that's the only thing I was worried about. Priority's on you.
I passed.
Oh, damn, I
want
passed.
this fight. What are we talking
Okay,
about?
Cammy, do you know what you want?
Yeah, I was gonna get Thoracle.
Man,
What if it's at the bottom?
Even better.
it was a flawless strategy to get me to counter, stop my own win, and not.
Dude, this has been like the game of misplays. You pitch it to him.
Oh,
Wow. Wow.
That's
holy
crazy.
cow!
That is nuts.
Okay.
Okay.
There's no stopping that, I guess.
Help.
Just
Beast.
Missed up.
No.
No.